Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Whatever time you're watching me today, it's Sid from Sid Sticks. I'm back again. I got another goodie tonight, folks. I got an athlete that grew up in the city of Bemidji, Minnesota, a lumberjack who's a multi-sport athlete, but ended up concentrating on golf and hockey. He grew up there playing on the hockey team. He was on the varsity, which represented Region 8 in the state tournament 73 and 74. And 74, they were runner-up on the golf team that was in four consecutive state tournaments. I believe they won the last state tournament. There was a single class back in 75. We'll talk about that. This gentleman also opted to play some golf down in college after his high school career. We went down south and played at Lamar University in Texas. He won three golf college tournaments there, including placing 38 in the NCAA national tournament in 78. He also qualified for three U.S. Opens, once being a single shot off the lead after 38 holes in 82. But he did have success overseas, as he'll talk about, winning three tournaments over there. And then Bill played great amateur career in Minnesota, won numerous tournaments. The list is long for those of their golf fans out there. The Birchmont, Pine de Palm, Minnesota State Am. And he was inducted in the Minnesota Amateur Golf Association, I believe, in 2009. He was the Player of the Year 3 years in a row from 92 to 94. So some quite accolades, and I'm sure I missed a few, but I'm very pleased to bring on a former Bemidji Lumberjack and one heck of a guy, Bill Israelson. Bill, how you doing tonight? Bill, how you doing? You got me there? I had you. We were talking earlier. Was the sound working, bud? Did you mute yourself? Can you hear me, Bill?
Still going to hear you.
All right. Hey, technology, you gotta love it, eh? You know, I'm not a techie, but I know enough to be dangerous, and hey, things come up. So I'm sure I missed a few things in that intro, but quite a laundry list of accolades, as I tell people out there. So when I used to get people on, Bill, I like to talk about where it all started. So can we talk about growing up in Bemidji and some mentors and things as such, on the ice sheet as well as on the golf course? I know you started very young in golf.
I can't hear.
Let's talk about. There you go. I got you. I got you. You got me now?
Are you gone again?
All right, Bill, back on here. You got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Technology, it's a wonderful world, isn't it? It's a great when it works fine, and then there's little things that glitches. But we're back. We're back. So what I was saying is that once I sit down with somebody, I always like to say and start where it all started. Growing up in Bemidji, I know you started golf real early and you're playing hockey too, but um, growing up in Bemidji, what were some mentors? Was there some coaches or really that pushed you to these sports to help you out? I always like to find out the background of what really helped you become what you are today.
Well, I'll tell us a quick story. So I got involved in golf through caddying, and I was 10 years old. You're supposed to be 12. I snuck out on a rainy day with my brothers and happened to get out since a lot of the caddies didn't show up that day. And surprisingly, some group from 3M Wanawalk used to come up from Park Rapids. They always had the money. You used to like to get a bag like that. And lo and behold, George Miken and the actor Mike Saxton were in the group I was caddying in. And so I ended up caddying for Mike, and I was out there barefoot, didn't ever wear shoes back then. And we got done with 18 holes, and it was like 55. It was a crappy summer, day back in the 70s, like we used to have, kind of with the global cooling stuff. And he asked me if I played any other sports. I said, yeah, baseball. And the caddy rate was $3. And he goes, here's $15. Go buy yourself a pair of spikes. And fortunately, there wasn't any caddies around that day. They probably would have beat me up for the money, because like I said, how could a guy that's never caddied before come out and get $15 to caddy? So, but like I said, I've always felt lucky, as far as golf is. And like I said, the first time I went out caddying, and like I said, I played baseball for the traveling team. The guys won the state baseball championship in 1973 when I switched just to only golf. And as far as mentors, we had some really, really good coaching. And I think that's one thing that these small towns are pretty darn lucky, because the coaches, they know you, they know your families and everything like that. So it's just a great way of growing up. And, instead of your mom and dad having to do everything, all the discipline, stuff like that, you get it through your sports. And, I had Chuck Grillo, who was just an awesome guy. our hockey coach, Brian Grand, and then my longtime mentor, Larry Perkins, who kind of ran the golf program in Bemidji. I think Bemidji still has the most state championships in golf. It's like 7. And Larry was an integral part of that. And like I said, when he didn't have any other kids, he he treated everybody the same, and he was tough but very fair and pretty demanding. He always tried to raise the bar and try to get the best out of you. And we were just so fortunate in Bemidji having these people, coaching the younger people and kind of making them into who they're going to become later on. Not so much professional athletes, although we had a bunch of people that end up making it in the professional ranks. But it was just a great time in the 70s to grow up in Bemidji. We had really good athletes all across every sport. So you didn't have to travel 200 miles to get competition. I mean, you had it right in your own town.
And that's back when there's one class of sports, right? You had one class in golf at that time, one class
Yeah,
in hockey, if I
we
recall.
were the last class in 1975 to win the state golf tournament. And the funny thing about it, so you had 6 players on your team all year long, and I think we won our last 11 tournaments. And I think every one of our guys on the team had won an individual title. But when you got to the regionals, you took your top 4 scorers and you had to kick 2 guys off, even if you won the regional. So you lost 2 players, even though they had been a part of your team the whole time. And so you got down to state, you only counted 3 out of 4 scores because they tried to get the tournament done in one day. And our coach got the rule change because he thought it was so unfair for these kids that had played really well all year long and all of a sudden not really be a part of the championship team. And so that's when they went to 2-class golf, and then you were back to where you had 6 guys on your team counting 4.
Okay. Now we're talking a lot about golf. I want to throw a couple pictures up, and I want you talked about that tournament you caddied at, and here's one of the pictures of you golfing barefoot, right?
Yep.
So
Like I said, I never wore shoes till I was 16 because I had like a double triple E foot. And back then, I mean, if you got a size D width, it was about as all they went. So the shoes were so uncomfortable. They finally made me wear shoes starting at 16 because they thought that the chemicals on the green, but it was really because I made so many putts. They thought I was like feeling the greens with my feet. I mean, it's a true story. They actually thought that, I had an advantage because I was, playing barefoot. But this particular picture was the Gonvick Open. It was a little sand green tournament that we used to go to late August. And that's where I met my future wife, if you can believe it. I beat her dad in the men's part of the draw when I was 13 years old because the guy that ran the tournament in the golf course there, I'd beat his kids the previous 2 years in the junior division. And so when I got there, he said, you can't play in the juniors. You have to play in the men's championship. And I ended up beating my neighbor in a playoff. And of course, I beat my future wife's, who was a super competitive guy. I beat her dad. So I always kidded her. I said, I bet on the way home, he said, you'll never date that boy, after beating him because he was so competitive.
no, that's a good story. That's a good. Well,
Probably
how many years
didn't.
was it? 17 years later, you guys are married or something like that. I think I read that was
Yeah. So
that's quite
surprisingly,
quite.
I never went out. She ended up being a waitress at the golf course, and I was a senior in college, and she had just graduated from high school, and we went out on our first date. And yeah,
I'm going to throw up another picture here too. As this is a few years later. I think you were 14 in that one. And this one here, this is when you're 16 at the Birchmont. So let's talk about that. What are you guys holding? They give you little TVs? Is that what that is for a trophy
yeah.
or
So
what?
they had portable TVs, a radio TV. So that was kind of the in thing. And instead of giving golf equipment all the time, uh, the gal on the left was one of the best women players in the state. She actually played an exhibition with Arnold Palmer, Patty Berg. The governor played. It was down in Delwood. It was the opening for their deal when she was 16 years old. And that was when this deal, we both won. She won the women's and I won the men's at 16. So it was kind of something that we share. We've been lifelong friends forever. And
That's amazing.
she
That's
also won the
amazing.
Big Ten and she won the North South. She was a very accomplished amateur golfer. So, but I remember watching her play down in this exhibition with Patty Berg and Arnold Palmer. It was just phenomenal. And here this gal was Julie Gumley. I was 16 years old and just a phenomenal player. And she
I'm
was originally
assuming
from
she's in,
Crookston, Minnesota.
okay. And I'm assuming she's in the Hall of Fame in Minnesota too for women's
She
side.
is in the Hall of Fame. Her brother
Okay.
Leonard is not. He's an attorney in retired attorney in California for the death penalty, and he actually has their old cabin here on Lake Bemidji, and we play 3 times a week with him. So
Wow. Let me pull up, or since we're talking high school golf again and youth golf. I'm going to pull up because you just got done golfing with your crew. Here's the picture back in the day of that state tournament team from I think it was Bemidji Pioneer, Lakeland News, or whatever the Pioneer. I think it was the Pioneer. Excuse me.
Yep.
You on the left, and then we got the
Then
Schwartz,
you got
Getter.
Jack Schwartz, who was a tremendous athlete, all-state football, all-state basketball, and I talked him into playing golf down at Lamar University, college golf, and we're still lifelong friends. He's got a few body parts, when you play football and all these other sports, sometimes your knees give out and whatever. And then the young guy to the next to him, Brett Yetter, actually worked for NASA, and so he was kind of a brainiac. Still does really well. And then Eric Niskin lives in Bemidji, and he was the Bemidji golf coach for probably 15 or 20 years.
Yeah,
Still plays real well, and he's actually designed a few golf courses too. So
good for him. Let's go fast forward a few years from there to there.
yeah, but then
That's then, and
last year we all got
this is
together
now.
there to kind of celebrate after 50 years of winning the championship, and it was the last single A golf championship. So in 1976 they went to a two-class system only because you had to kick off two guys off your team after you'd won the regional because they only took 4 players from each team down to the state because they didn't have room for everybody. They played 36 holes in one day. So unfortunate for some of your guys that had played and won a bunch of tournaments all year long, and then they didn't get to be on the team for the state championship.
Good memories, though. Good memories, I'm sure. So, talking about the golf side, let's hop over the way and we'll come back to the golf team. It's kind of all over the place. So you were in the 70s. So you said you had Coach Gran as a C team in hockey. Is that what that was you were saying? Or was that baseball he helped you with? You moved on to
Brian
maybe then
Gran, yeah, well,
varsity.
he was our C team coach, and then when we were in the we lost in the finals to Edina in 1974. He was the assistant coach then, so he was moving up the ladder, and then eventually, I think Chuck coached for 2 more years, a couple of state tournament teams, and then he went to the cities, and Brian became the head coach for maybe 20 years for Bemidji. So, but phenomenal player. Watch him play at Bemidji State. He was always an idol. He was a Roseau guy that just had the magic. He was Neil Broughton before there was Neil Broughton. Really, he was a guy that all these guys used to try to run out there, and they could never. All they got was glass and boards. They could never hit him, because he was just too elusive. So Roseau, they've produced a few decent centers.
I'm trying to pin Brian down. Someday we'll get him on with me as well. So I want to throw up those pictures. Here's the 73 team. In back there, I think that's Coach Grillo on the left coach on top there. And are you next to the goal? Where are you on this picture here? Are you down on the bottom in the front row?
I'm right next to the goalie on the far right.
That's right. Kind of smirking on there. That's got the little smirk on the face.
Yeah, I was a whopping probably 130 pounds in, about 5'4". So not exactly your biggest guy. And the thing about it, I wore shoulder pads for the first time when I was a freshman in high school. And the first practice, we were doing a tip-in drill, and the goalie stuck out his stick, and I caught it and flew into the boards and separated my shoulder. And when I came back, I never put shoulder pads on again because I thought that was the reason that I separated it. So wow. I was small, and then I really played small because, like I said, I didn't wear shoulder pads.
So I'm going to pull up. Okay, so that's 73, and then back in 73, you guys didn't have as good a year as 74, so you got beat in the first round, if I recall. Here, looking at the brackets, Hibbing beat you 4-2, and they were the eventual winner. So you got beat by the best team in state that year. But then you moved on. Before I pull the picture up, to the 74, where you got beat by the infamous Edina East. Another one
the
team.
Cake Eaters from Edina East. Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
We had a couple. So I beat every team we beat. We finally beat International Falls when I was a senior. We beat every single team. We never did beat the Cake Eaters. That's the only team we played in the 3 years that I played that we never beat. We beat all the range teams. That's where all the power was. And of course, Region 8 wasn't so shabby either, but we had a lot of good teams. So that's when we used to have the back door. And unfortunately, in 75, when we lost to Roseau in the finals of the section, that was the first year they didn't have the back door because they had more Southern schools then. And so we didn't have that bonus game to get down in the state tournament.
So here is that picture there?
That's the 74 team.
Yeah, that's the runner-up here. You guys had a hell of a team that year, and I want to talk about that. Talk about some of the players that you played with because, excuse me, looking at that roster, and then before you were on the varsity, you had guys like Gary Sargent that you graduated before you're on the team.
Yeah,
this squad here. I'm going to pull up some names or pictures, and I want you to talk about these guys right here.
Yeah,
Bill
like
Hillman.
Billy Hillman was the
That's it.
best athlete I've ever seen, no matter what sport he picked up. Our basketball team won the 1974 state championship the same year we lost in the finals in hockey. And when Billy would play basketball with us, he was their best player. I mean, he was an unbelievable athlete, and he'd go in the gym and school the guys that run the basketball team. And a quick story, because nobody, even as good an athlete as you were, you could never learn how to play golf very quick. And Billy stopped playing baseball and came out his sophomore year for golf. And I remember we went over to Cass Lake, which was always open a little earlier in the clubs around here, and he shot 110. And I said, Billy, here's one sport you can't play. And by the end of the year, he was breaking 80, and he qualified for our team. It was just unbelievable how
Just a natural at everything, huh?
athletic he was. It didn't matter what he does. He had the best hand-eye coordination and just a phenomenal athlete. And unfortunately, like I said, people know that Billy passed away here last year from a heart attack, but he had some real issues with circulation and stuff like that. And it had both his legs amputated at the knee, which is just really a sad deal, because we just had this hackers and has-beens that we play every year up here with golf guys from former athletes, and Billy used to always play with us and stuff like that. But the last few years, like I said, his health failed him, but just an unbelievable player and great teammate and just a great guy.
I like to talk about, that's why I like to do this too. Talk about others that people don't realize. Like I would never known about Bill Hill, right? Or these guys, but researching this and you talking about them, it's pretty amazing. Some of the athletes that he played with. Let me put up a couple others on related to hockey now. This gentleman here, I think you played with him as well.
Yep.
Gary, not Gary, but it's Earl Sargent.
No, that's
Let's
Earl.
talk
That's
about him.
Junior. So that's Gary
Yeah,
called him Junior, and another get just unbelievable athlete, baseball pitcher, just a phenomenal wing in hockey. You know, he came close to end up. Certainly, he was AHL type deal. Never did make it to the NHL at any games and stuff like that. So, yeah, and he was a good football player too. The Native Americans that we had on we called them Indians back then, but they were just phenomenal guys, and they were just such good athletes. So, you know, probably our 5 or 6 best athletes besides Billy in our high school were all natives, and they were just phenomenal. No matter what sport they played, they could do it. So, and they were great teammates too. It was just fun. The sergeants, Gary, there's not a finer individual out there. He's just, you know, he's an 11 on a 10, a scale of 10. He still is, and he's up here in the community. He's just an awesome guy. So we was very fortunate to play with the sergeants and watch them play hockey, and they were a big part of why the program and the development of Bemidji hockey was what it was. So just lucky to play with a lot of great
we'll
players.
talk. Yeah, and we're talking hockey, but we'll talk a little about Earl too when we're talking about the baseball squads too. But let's stick with the hockey team. But I know looking at when I go back and look at some of the points, I look back at Earl Sargent's post high school career. He played with the Sugar Kings back in the day. And in one year, he
Yep.
had 123 points in 58 games for the Fargo Moorhead Sugar Kings in that mid JHL.
Yeah.
That's not bad for not too bad for that guy.
Yeah. Plus,
So,
that's back when Doug Woog used to coach the St. Paul Vulcans. And boy, you talk about some fights. Wow. That was like Donnybrook brawls like the NHL had. That was in the junior stuff too. And with the Sugar
well,
Kings, phenomenal deal.
that was kind of gearing up towards the mid 70s. We're getting close to the Slapshot movie, so that was the Slapshot era there, right? So
Yeah.
there's some rough and tough tumble stuff. So I'm going to throw
Yeah.
up one other guy that I think he played with or was around, or hockey related. But can you tell me about this gentleman? Because until I
Yeah.
researched Mr. Hansen there.
Yeah. So Keith was a guy that he was kind of a late developer, but he was a big guy. Back then, if you had a 6'4" guy playing hockey, that was very unusual. And he just got better all the time. And then he went and played at Northern Michigan after high school, and that's when he really blossomed up. And I believe he won the cup with Calgary. So, but it wasn't so much for his skills as much as for his fighting. But I see Keith. I still see Keith around here, and I'll tell you what, he is in phenomenal shape and look like he could go right now. So, but he's another one. When I think of the guys I played with on defense, Billy ended up playing at North Dakota, was their captain, and ended up getting some games with the Canadians. And then Keith who ended up being at Calgary, and they actually won the NCAA championship at Northern Michigan. I think they won one championship. And then I played with a guy named Dick Howe of the famous Hall family, and very involved in getting hockey in Bemidji. Their dad was Bill Howe, who played for BSU and stuff like that, and kind of really got the ball swinging. He was a banker in town and really was kind of the instrument in getting indoor hockey and stuff like that for Bemidji. But Dick ended up being the captain at Notre Dame and played. So the three guys that I played with were just phenomenal players, and that's why everyone always remembers that. Boy, you were a heck of a player too. I go like, well, might have had something to do with the guys that you're playing with.
Around you, right? Hey, nothing wrong with that. You got to be,
Yeah.
some players, good players around to help you dish you the puck every now and help you out in the defensive zone. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. I mean, looking at that, to have three guys that went on, and obviously four with Hollow too. So pretty darn good athletes. And on that topic, talking about those teams, can you talk about your coach? I mean, I mentioned Brian Graham, but let's talk about Chuck Grill a little bit too. I mean, what kind of a mentor was he to you as a head coach down there and assistant coach in other sports? Um, because obviously he went on to be a scout, and for years in the NHL. Had
Yeah.
stand up the ring as well. But can you discuss him a little bit as a coach for you?
So Chuck was he was in the Marines, so when he came out, there was certainly tough disciplinarian, even though sometimes he would bend the rules for himself. But his first love always was hockey. But he was just a great baseball coach. They won the championship when he was the head coach there, and then he became the head coach of the hockey team the next year. But he was the one that used to run the fall clinics. Kids like myself I was a wrestler and played a little basketball. Hockey was not my sport, and yet he got me down in these clinics to kind of get you on skates and seeing if maybe hockey might be the sport. And so he was very instrumental in working with the younger kids all the time. Always building up your program from the underneath was very important to him, and getting the other coaches down there to help out and stuff like that. And I know I certainly have, kind of getting off topic here, but when I've coached now, I've always had, players on my team and stuff like that to make sure they come down and help the juniors and get involved with the programs, because that's really how you develop not only the kids that are coming down to help these younger kids, but also the younger kids to really get that enthusiasm. And that's kind of the model that I grew up on, where you had your high school kids that came down and helped the younger kids and the youth kids, and put some time back in the game for what they benefited. And Chuck was very instrumental in starting that kind of stuff. It was interesting because they had this Bemidji International Hockey Camp here with Bob Peters and Murray Williamson, and these guys like Larry Plow and professional skaters and the really good high school coaches. They'd come down for lodging and free golf, and that was about it. And we used to always have a 3:30 tea time with whoever had the older kids, and it was always Chuck Grillo and Larry Ross, who was the old famous coach from International Falls. And then it would be like the Rosses, either Donnie or Gary or Larry Plow, who played for the Canadians. It was just a great time, that 3:30 time in between when they had on ice and then they had their game in the evening. And it was just fun to get to know all these people. I actually worked at the hockey school when I was 16. And that was the same year that I won the Birchmont. So you just think about, how do you find the time? But yeah, it was just a busy summer doing a little bit of everything. And the funny thing about the camp, though, I was just kind of mopping floors and putting jerseys in there and sharpening skates and stuff like that. And then I won the Birchmont, and the next thing I'm up in front on the closing of the camp day on Saturdays, instead of having to do all the mopping and stuff like that, like the other guys, they had me up there and introducing me, and here's our champion golfer. And so it got me out of a lot of work.
The Bennies of being a good golfer. So you mentioned that, you talked about you were wrestling, back in the day too. So I'm sure Grill a little bit kind of helped you woo you into the hockey, game. Because at that you were smallish, you said that would have been, a perfect wrestler, that lower weight, 5'4" or something like that. So well, kudos to Coach Grillo for getting you interested in hockey. And that's what I like to call grassroots there, right there. We work with the younger guys, getting the kids work with the younger guys. And I remember a story, speaking of stories, I'm going off topic of it too. I think it was when Eichel was coaching, his assistant would go out, or maybe it was him, he'd go watch the Phi classes to see who was a good athlete.
Yeah.
Say, oh, I might want to consider playing hockey. I might consider playing hockey. And that enthusiasm, getting young kids involved, that's what it's all about. That's what really helps build the culture. Definitely the culture was built up there because of that. So I just had to point that out. Now, going back to that, let's go back a little bit, talk about hockey again before we hop on to get a little more golf. I wanted to talk about that. You mentioned you had the back door. So you beat the Falls. I've interviewed couple different Falls players. Go back to Lefty Curran back then. That was like the Falls and Roseau and that time you guys are in the '70s. Bemidji really made a change. When you're making a tournament because they had the back door, but for Bemidji to take that step up and then be runners up that way, that's quite the accolade. That had to be one of the best teams. I know I played against guys in '86. They had a squad with Big George Palau, but
Yeah.
your squad back in '74 had to be, if not the best, one of the best to come out of Bemidji. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just my opinion after looking at some of these players he played with.
Yeah. Like I said, they're all a lot of 2 and 3 sport athletes. Actually, I think our 75 team was actually the best team we had, but it was the weirdest deal. Right from the get-go, like the second week of practice, our top line center, I used to have this hip check. It was kind of a signature move where we used to slide under the guy. It's considered kind of dirty nowadays, but it's just, especially for a smaller guy, it was kind of my signature move. And one of our guys was trying to say, I wonder if I could do that. And he ended up sticking his leg out and kneed our guy, and he ended up tearing his MCL. So we lose our top center right off the bat, pretty much shot for the year. And then our first line wing, he breaks his ankle, so he's done for the year. And then our other forward on that line separated his shoulder, so he missed half the year. So we just kept losing guys, but we were still having a phenomenal year. And we got to the regionals, and we got a couple guys back that had broke a thumb and broke a finger, and then the guy with the separated shoulder was back. So, but in the semifinals, we were playing Dave Christian and War Road, and they'd beat us 7-1 earlier in the year. We beat them 7-0, and right at the end of the game, our top line center breaks his leg. And so, of course, we're playing Roseau in the finals of the section, and guess what? I mean, they got Bruce Olson, center, Mike Berga, center, Neil Broughton, center. We don't have any centers. And in that particular game, we used to play only 3 defensemen, so you'd play 2 shifts and go off for 1. We actually played 2 shifts of defense, and we played 1 shift of forward because we were a little bit like the War Road teams used to be. We had about 8 guys. That's all that played in the game because we had like 7 top players out. And in that game, though, it was a good game. Right at the end of the first period, they scored from behind the net in the corner, shot it out. And our goalie was always a solid player, but he could be a little lazy. Yeah, and he didn't cover the post, and so they banked one in there, down 2-1. And then the start of the third period is 3-2, and Billy had tied up the score 2-2. End rush went through their whole team score. So we got a shot. Opening face-off. It goes over to the side from the red line. Guy takes a slap shot and scores from the red line. It was a killer.
I'm a former goalie,
so they beat us 5-3, and I just going like, wow, what could have been? So I really thought, because Himmerite was an unbelievable player by then, and this Keith Hansen had just came on and did such a force, And then, like I said, we had about another half dozen really good forwards, and they all got hurt. Usually you might lose 1 guy, maybe 2 guys at most for a season in high school anyway. And it was just like, what is going on? We were just jinxed that year. So, but we had a phenomenal year. It was just unfortunate,
A domino effect for injuries. So, and who was your goalie that year? Was that Wisner?
No, it was a guy that ended up playing Danny. God, what was Danny's name? And he ended up being the goalie at Bemidji State University. So he was only a sophomore, and he didn't have a great home life. And Danny's name is escaping my thinking here. Yeah. So, but in '76, they actually made it back to state the next year with the C squad goalie, because for whatever reason, this Danny, I don't know what he was out, but the Steve Scholke was the goalie, and then he had a appendectomy the day before the finals, so he was in the hospital. So they had the C squad goalie, they still won. But weird stories, you just never know what's going to happen.
And those are parts of memories that I'll never forget. To have the main goalie appendectomy. Oh boy. Anyway, so that's all about hockey. It's all about stories, right? And memories and things as such, and players we played with. So, but let's hop around a little bit now. After the tournament's done, and and you won the tournament after. I'm talking golf now. I'm all over the place. We're talking hockey, talking golf. You won that tournament in golf, and then you decide to go play golf down in Texas. How do you end up playing Lamar? I mean, back then I saw that they gave you a scholarship sight unseen, if I remember.
Yeah,
I saw that right when I read it, and that's unheard of. I'll see the guy play. So, how do you end up down there? Was there somebody recruited you? I mean, was there a guy that just said, "Hey, look at tell me the story behind going to Lamar"?
So we had a summer resident from St. Louis who was an English teacher. He played at Lamar when they had some really good teams. But back when they're NAIA, in fact, they won the national championship at Lamar, won it at Bemidji, in like 1968 or something like that. They won the national championship. And for whatever reason, shoot, I think the ice wasn't even off the lake when they had the championship up there. But so anyway, yeah, he just mentioned my name, and yeah, they literally called me up and said, we got a full scholarship for you, but you got to let us know in 24 hours. So free school sounded good, because then maybe we didn't have to get a summer job and just play golf. And so it worked out well for me. Back then, you used to play the state tournament at the University of Minnesota, and old time Les Bolstad, the famous coach, was down there. He was the starter in the first tee. And basically, if you won the state high school, they gave you a scholarship to play at Minnesota. And that was kind of win the state, you're going to Minnesota. My friend Miles Prestman had won the year before at Bagley and just had he had a nice high school career, but nothing special. And then he beat us all down at the state tournament. And yeah, so he ended up the U with a Williams scholarship, I think it was called. They always gave the winner of whatever. So the recruiting was nothing like it is nowadays, where kids are getting recruited 9, 10th grade, where they're already ready to sign up, especially with this NLI stuff. So it was an interesting time where, in fact, Tom Lehman, who was ended up being more of a football player and stuff like that, and just got into golf. He was going to St. John's, and all of a sudden, Rick Ermentrout, who happened to be the coach at University of Minnesota, some guy goes like, "I can't believe you're not having this guy on your team. He's phenomenal." And sure enough, yeah, Lehman went from St. John's over to the U there in his freshman year, and well, the rest is history,
So Don Lamar, how do you guys finish up as far as your season's on there? I mean, you guys finished as far as NCAA tournaments. How did you end up doing down there? I know you won a few college tournaments, but what about the team?
Yeah. So on the team side, so we had a great schedule back then, other than Oklahoma State and Oral Roberts, and I think Centenary, because Hal Sutton played there and his dad had a lot of money. And so they all had Lear jets to fly around. But the rest of us, we were in crappy station wagons, usually driving 10 hours wherever. And this was the good teams like Houston, who was winning all the national championships when I played. And they actually did recruit me a little bit. But the coach, every tournament when I was as a freshman, I come down, he goes, "I can't believe I let you go, but you weren't cocky enough on the phone." So that's why I passed on you. And anyway, but we played against all the best teams, Texas, Houston, Oklahoma State. So, I got to play with the best players and stuff like that. Our team was like one notch down. And so we never actually, as a team, qualified for the NCAA. I played a couple of NCAA championships my junior and senior year. So, but they got a great format now with the match play. It's phenomenal. Great for TV and just everything. So golf is besides hockey, I think golf's the other sport that's really, really knows what they're doing right now and putting out a really good product. So especially for the college and high school side.
Of course, he talked about, the Houston guy talked, and he says back then you couldn't leave and hop and jump ship. If you jump ship, you have to sit out.
No, if you jumped, you had to sit out a year. So
yep.
Yeah,
and now with this portal thing, it's crazy. People at hockey are going all over. I mean, it's ridiculous how many hundreds of kids go in there, and all sports. I'm sure golf is included. I haven't looked at golf, but I know hockey is and football. It's like it's nuts. It's nuts. Now I'm going to ask you something about we were talking about. You're from Minnesota. You went on to Texas. Why is Minnesota such a hotbed? I know, but per capita, it's got so many golf courses in the United States, but there's so many really good golfers that do come out of Minnesota. Can you explain that? Because it's a short season we have here, really, when you get down to it.
Yeah, especially like you say, they talk about there's better athletes that play golf now and stuff like that. But like I said, I described Roseau. Those guys, all the hockey players, they played golf in the spring, and they these different sports. And so a lot of times I think it's very beneficial that you're not playing one sport year round all the time. So I remember, going from hockey to golf, hockey was more of a team sport. You kind of had to be a little fired up out there. You had to control your emotions, but at the same time you had to play with a lot of emotion. And then all of a sudden you switched over to kind of what was an individual sport, and you just a different mentality of kind of being patient and letting things come to you, and picking your spots, and you're kind of your own coach out there and stuff like that. So I just love the cross training with the hockey and the golf. But also, like I said, especially if you had some habits that need to be changed, you had a whole 6 months to kind of digest that down, and then when the spring would come, you could develop some really good new habits and things like that. But I think it's more just the enthusiasm where you went from one sport to the other, and especially since you'd been up in the snow and stuff like that, you were ready to go. Because I know up here in Bemidji, as soon as you'd see dry ground, we'd be out there hitting balls, and we'd get kicked off the college field, and then we get kicked off here, and then we go over to these courses, and they usually one after the other would come out and kick you off, so, but you just didn't care. And I still saw the other day, I had a heavy jacket and a sweater on and long pants, and two junior golfers were out there with a t-shirt and shorts on, and yeah, it was just a different mentality. But that's the way Minnesota golfers are, I think. 55 for an Arizona guy like me now is like freezing cold, and I think I'll take the day off, where these other people can't wait to get out because they finally got the sun out, so I think it's as much mental as anything.
Yeah, because it is tough playing spring sports in Minnesota. I mean, trust me, I remember playing a baseball game in National Falls and sleeting, and we're playing a game. It's crazy. You got to play golf and that stuff too.
Yeah.
I want to throw up a picture here for you. I want to comment on this gentleman I interviewed before, and I want you to give me your thoughts on this young man here, because he called you his mentor. And I want you to talk about this guy right here. This is at one of the tournaments he won, I believe. Andy Brink.
Yeah, he won the state open. Yeah, he was my neighbor. He used to come over probably between 8 and 10. We used to play. And you know how you would kind of pop off, hey, we need to play tomorrow. And I used to be a ball hunter too. So I used to take the young junior golfers out there in Bemidji and show them how to ball hunt. It's a certain art where you got to look at different spots and things like that. And Andy was literally the most disciplined young kid. I tell you one thing, if he said he was going to do something, he always did it, and he always did it 100%, whether it was golf or practicing. I just never saw a young kid have more discipline at a young age than him. And it would be too funny, I used to like to practice till dark, which in Minnesota is like 10:30, you can hit until you ever. And I get to the point where I just hated that, for it to get dark, because I would just get hit and hit. Because we didn't have a driving range, so I'd have to hire a kid late in the day after everybody had left the course, and then I'd start hitting balls. And anyway, so I'd tell Andy that, yeah, we'll play tomorrow or something like that. And then, of course, I'd go down and shoot some pool and drink a few beers and stuff like that. And I'd wake up about 6:30 in the morning, and I'd see these little beady eyes over my bed, and he'd come down through the back way at my house. He could get down the stairs without waking anybody up. And he'd be looking at me going like, we're going golfing, aren't we? And we're going this and that. It was just hilarious. He'd be right there, and I'd kind of go like, yeah, I'm a little hungover here, but yep, I said I was going to go. So we'd hop in the car and go out to the course and play. I nicknamed him Mick Dundee because he always had this hat and he flipped it up. That was when that Crocodile Dundee days.
Yeah, Crocodile.
But the thing about Andy, like I said, he just was one of those kids that, you knew he had the it. No matter what he did, he just did it 100%. And yeah, I mean, he was very athletic and things like that, but he just had such discipline that you just can't teach young people. And that's carried all the way through. And you can see in his career and stuff like that, he's just got that mental toughness that you just can't give somebody. And it just kind of nurtured. But yeah, it would be too funny. All of a sudden I see these little beady eyes looking over me going like, I told him we were golfing this morning. I'm not feeling like it, but yeah, he'd get me up and play. And yeah.
Well, he tells me some stories. He talked about the golfing aspect, but he said that in the backyard there, and you guys used to play some shinny. Can you talk a little about the old shinny games he had in ice hockey there, and then he didn't want to play again? You're pretty rough. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Well, we used to have a place called Cameron Park down there, so it was right by the college. You used to get some college kids come down there to play shinny hockey, and most of the high school kids would play. In fact, on weekends, we'd have a Saturday night game, and we still went down there and played from 1 to 5. We'd play for 4 or 5 hours, and then we'd play our regular game. And like I say, most of the time when I played, the 3 years I played, we only played 3 defensemen. So you're going to be logging a lot of minutes, but coaches never worried about you being tired or whatever like that. You got to save yourself. So we went down there. So the Brink kids used to come down there, and it was Bobby and Andy and his older brother. Skipping my mind here right now. So anyway, yeah, I was a little bit of a cheap shot, kind of more on the fun side, So when you know how to slash just right, where you don't do any harm, but it gives them a little a little scare. But it was too funny because his younger brother Bobby always wanted to be on my team because he didn't want to get hacked on. So he would always tell his dad, who was the high school coach there eventually, when Andy played, he'd always go like, I want to be on Bill's team because I don't want to get hacked on, But I was just toughing those boys up, and it was it was a good time. And here again, it was one of those passing times. This was back when, not by now, when I was coming back from college or something like that, or was playing professional golf, and I would go down there and play shinny hockey with them. But I learned that from Chuck Grill. You hack, but you know exactly where they got coverage.
Like I said, you learn all these different courts. Grillo had the Marine mentality, kind of, tough gets tough. That's you got to have that mental toughness and that physical toughness when you're playing the sport of hockey, of course. So I just had to bring up Andy because you know, I interviewed him and he mentioned you kind of as a mentor. So I want to make sure I threw kudos out to you for that. But some good stuff when he told me you're hacking and whacking and not to hurt, but to make them make them think a little
Yeah.
bit. So I'm gonna throw some more pictures again. I'm gonna talk about what we got here. I gotta get my banner stuff out of the way here, playing around. My media assets. There we go. See, technology sometimes gets me too. I want to throw up guys here that you in golf played with. I guess I should say. And I want you to give me some thoughts on this. This gentleman right here, because you mentioned his name about in St. John's, unbeknownst to me, he said he went to St. John's. He played. Tell me about him a little bit. Some battles he may have had playing, together. We're playing against or playing together. Let's talk about Tom a little bit.
Yeah, well, so Tom was a good football player. His dad actually was a quarterback at St. John's, and so Tom was the quarterback at Alexandria. So of course, practice starts like August 10th. So he missed a lot of golf when he was coming up through high school. His seasons always got cut short, so he didn't play as much tournament golf as because of the football. And then once he got done playing high school, and obviously wasn't going on, so he was kind of a late bloomer, but he was always a great ball striker. Yeah, just a great guy. And like I said, you talk about, I'm not saying he overachieved, but amazing to be Ryder Cup captain. His foundations, like the Dayton's Challenge that he ran for years at Minneapolis Golf Club that raised a ton of money. Because Tom's a pretty introverted guy. If he's within, a bunch of strangers, there might not be a conversation, for him to do all the things and accomplish all the things he has as a player and outside of golf, it's pretty phenomenal, and especially when you grew up watching him develop and things like that. So we only played once because we used to play the resort tournaments. I played him in the finals at Alexandria. It was a great final. He ended up beating me 3-2, but that was the only time we actually went head to head there. He was about 2 or 3 years out when I was winning my state amateurs and stuff like that. So he wasn't really like a contender like that. And then, he got his tour card. He struggled a little bit. It's when he got on the Nike tour and he just found the magic. I think he finally found a little belief. And, ironic though, it was close to not, shutting down his career when he was going to be the University of Minnesota golf coach, but they wanted him to run the cross country stuff out of the golf course in the wintertime. And he wanted to still play some Asian tour golf in he used to go down to South Africa. So he said, no, I still want to play a little bit. And that's when his career just took off. So I think there's so many careers like Tom's where you're on the brink of maybe giving it up. You're giving up your dream. And there's that last gasp. It's kind of like when you're playing blackjack and you got your last dollar and all of a sudden you win a hand. And the next thing you know, you're winning all kinds of hands. And that certainly was with Tom. And we're still very good friends. I see him all the time. He actually has built a home back up in Alexandria, where his parents were, and so I think we'll see a lot more of him up here in Minnesota here in the last few years, because his senior tour career is just about over. He just had his knee replaced, so his health is not that great. He's getting to that kind of that 65 number for senior golfers, which is not good.
The body kind of breaks down. I mean, I'm not
And your mind, I think it's as much as your mind as your body.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. I know the Tom Lehman name. I wasn't much of a golfer my day. I'm a hack. I mean, I golf once every 5 or 10 years, whether I want to or not. It's because
Yeah.
I do it at a reunion. They pay me for landscaping, so I
Yeah.
like to watch. But I wasn't much of a hack. I'm a hack. So I'm going to throw up one other guy. And this is a Roseau guy. I want you to give me your thoughts on because I really, I could kick myself now for sitting down with this gentleman here. Can you give me your thoughts on, of course, John Harris? Because synonymous name when it comes to Minnesota golf as well, like yourself.
Yeah, like I said, John he was one of the players that I always looked up to. He'd come to the Birchmont, as good a player as he won. Like I said, he was a great player at Minnesota. Not only, and same with the hockey, but yeah, he'd come here and he'd always lose, though. It was amazing. And back then I remember where they used to let you play extra holes, and even when the tournament was going on, and I was a caddy there, he'd let me play along with him, practicing and stuff like that. And I remember his old Odie Crispin putter, but he was a crappy putter, and I was a very good putter as a young kid. So I go like, well, that's one thing. If John could putt like me, he probably would win the tournament, So, and then, like I said, just the whole Harris family, with Doc and one quick Doc Harris story though. So they had a new tournament down in Mille Lacs, and we flew down there on his plane, and we had another guy drive a car down there because he was going to fly back to Roseau afterwards. But we got to fly down in his plane from Bemidji, and we flew into Mille Lacs. And after the tournament got over, we're all going to leave and stuff like that. So we get out there, his plane won't start. And so going, God, what do you like to be stranded, down in Mille Lacs there by Garrison? What the heck? I got a plane down there. What are you going to do? But one of our guys had been in the high school aeronautics program that they had. So he had a kind of an idea of how the pedals and stuff work. So Doc put him into the plane, and then he's going to hand start it by grabbing the prop and swinging it around. So he gets it started, and now you got the young kid in the plane, and of course the plane's going around and circles now, and Doc is chasing the plane trying to get in to stop it. It was one of those things out of the movies that you kind of just have to laugh, but it was pretty dangerous too, because you got that prop going around, and yeah, it took him a couple minutes to get in there, but fortunately, no one got hurt. But I just remember all of a sudden his eyes lit up and go like, all of a sudden this plane starts going around in a circle, and yeah, it was quite a deal. But yeah, but as far as John, wow, what a career at Minnesota. And then, like I said, when he won the national amateur, was just a phenomenal feat for someone that didn't really have a lot of success when he first turned pro. So
It's interesting. When I interviewed people, like, I talked about John. He played hockey and he was a golfer. Bud Snyder, when I interviewed him, he wanted to play baseball. He's a hell of a baseball player, but he played, obviously made his name in hockey. A lot of these guys like yourself, multi-sport athletes, and you don't see it as much nowadays, Bill. I mean, kids are concentrating so much on one sport now versus playing, maybe two, maybe three. Of course, in small towns, you got to play more than one sport, otherwise sports don't survive. But what are your thoughts on that now compared back when you were a kid or when I was a kid?
yeah, like I said, everything is always follows a trend, and that became the point where like a lot of your good high school hockey players would all of a sudden they felt like they needed to play juniors instead of playing for their high school team, and so and they needed to play year round, which is I don't understand that at all. But when it becomes the formula, and also when you have as much money that's involved in that formula, and they're pushing it because there's unfortunately it pushes out a lot of kids that probably like a lot of kids like myself that started out kind of slow. You didn't start out with skates when you're 4 or 5 years old. So I don't disagree with it. Like with my own kids, I want them to play other sports. They can play hockey, but they end up playing basketball, but they can play it, the sport. And that's what I'd rather see more kids, especially up to like 12 or 13, maybe sample a little bit more. I think that's why you see a lot of injuries now though, especially at the professional level, because they're just like overtrained for just only specific muscles, and they just don't have that well-rounded, you know, bodies that a lot of people have. They don't develop their whole body system, and yeah, it's interesting. But that's where the money is right now. That's where the coaching, everything, and so I don't
Oh
see
yeah, I mean,
change.
you got it, and I'm sure golf and hockey, you got personalized coaches for this, for hockey, you got a skating coach, you got a strength coach, you got everything. I mean, back in the day, I remember as a kid, I saw Bobby Hull on whatever it was, Newsweek or Time, I forget, a sport, some magazine. He's got two bales of hay in his arm. That's
Yeah,
what his workout was, working on the farm. Now these guys are working out year round. I mean, there's no fat on them. That's why I get
yeah.
hurt.
If you ever saw Gary Sargent in the locker room, I mean, you're going like, "Wow, is that guy on steroids or something?" Because he was just so physically fit because he played three sports that his body was just chiseled, because he just was always active. But he was so well rounded with the different muscles that he used, and he didn't do any weights. It was just activity that made him so strong and things like that. And a lot of times, like I said, I don't know why, more guys just don't do sports to stay in shape versus having to go to the weight room and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I agree with that. Use all the different muscle groups from various, hand eye coordination of different sports. It all comes into play. I'm going to throw something up here. I don't know if this still stands, but can you tell me about this course right here? Does this still stand today, or does somebody have that beat already?
if you
Huh?
recognize the date, at the bottom, it's 10/21. It's October
Yeah.
21st. And I remember it was kind of a drizzly 55 degrees. We were playing a seven some because we had this little picky game we used to call where you'd pick a player and then they would throw a couple back. So it'd be 4-on-3. And I remember I got to 16. I said, geez, I got a few birdies today. And then another guy goes, yeah. And he added him up, goes like, well, you're like 9 under. Yeah. And so it was one of those days we were just out there playing with buddies on a really crappy day. And I always remember some of the best scores I've always shot has been when it's a little rainy, because it seems like you can make a ton of putts when it's rainy. It just seems like the ball finds the hole a little bit quicker. So it was one of those rounds where I wasn't really paying attention. And yeah, our course is kind of intimidating if you don't play it. It's visually kind of like a Pete Dye course where you kind of look like you're just going to hit it in the junk on every hole. And so the local knowledge, but yeah, just playing with friends, and all of a sudden you just kind of light it up. And yeah, I don't think too many people have come close to that score yet.
It's just everything was falling into place. Just one of those
Yeah,
days, you're in,
I made
in this.
I made a little cash that day. I can say that too.
Well, that's even better. That's to top it off even better there. Even better. I don't know if I threw up this picture, but I do have to throw up this because back a younger one. Where is it? Right there. Let's talk about this. Must be. I think this is 88. I think that there's from 1988. I don't know where you're playing there, but it looks like you're in the rhubarb there. Oh, a little tough, but a couple shots of you there.
Yeah, it looks like the state open. Yeah, in the 80s, National Car used to sponsor it, so it was the big event of the year. Used to get a lot of corporate people come out for the Pro-Am and things like that. And then they'd always have a half-hour show on KSTP TV highlights and stuff like that. And yeah, I think I blew the lead. I had the lead like 5 out of the 10 years in the 80s and never could hold it. And you can see where I'm in the bushes there. I had a tendency to hit it a little bit wild. So yeah, I blew a lot of chances to win the state open, and then finally won it in 91 coming from behind after having all those leads. The one guy basically had it wrapped up, and then I birdied like 4 holes in a row for 13, 14, 15, and 16. And yeah, he had like a 5-shot lead, and all of a sudden he didn't have a lead, and then he double bogeyed 17, and I beat him by a shot. So it was one of those deals where I didn't expect to win and did, where the other times, yeah. But I mean, I got beat by some really good players. Chris Perry played the tour, Dave Tentis. George Shortridge is a phenomenal player, maybe one of the greatest players that a lot of people would never know now. But if you ask anybody that grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, George was, well, he played a number of tour events, and he played on the Champions Tour and stuff like that. He had kind of a little bit of a, I don't know what it was. He was lousy. You got to be able to travel. The golf part or any kind of sports. You can have talent. You can play the sport real well, but there's the intangibles when you're not playing, when you're on the road by yourself, especially for golf and stuff like that, on how you handle all the downtime. And, there's more than a few really talented players in sports that have, succumbed to the idle time, as I call it.
Yeah, no, and
And you're kind of
that's
wondering,
something
so
that in every sport. I mean, you think the sport of hockey is. I mean, yeah, we won't go into it because we've all had our issues and stuff, but it does. It's the mind. When you're by yourself, a lot of things happen that should happen that are good for
yeah.
the. I mean, it's good for the person in general, but um, I want to talk about some of those names because when I was living in South St. Paul, there was a tournament, the Tape Mark, and you and I were talking about it back in the day. It was on the local TV public access, whatever they had. It was a big tournament, and some of these names you already mentioned a couple, but I want you to mention when I give you some. I'm going to throw some names out, and I want you to talk about them. Some names that I remember that you obviously played against. I'm going to throw a few out there. Just give me some comments on. One is Don.
Yeah, Don's probably been our best club pro player. Yeah, he still works at it really hard, although he's getting up there too. I think Don's like 63 now. So, but I think Don's won the most championships in Minnesota of any golfer for the state stuff. Yeah, he's been just an icon for the last really 35 years, and has been our best player. And he's not the longest hitter, so I think that frustrates him a little bit how far these young guys hit it now. He still wants to get out there and compete at the normal level, not the senior level. And it's pretty challenging when the guys you're playing are 100 yards ahead of you. So, but yeah, what a phenomenal player. He was a good hockey player too. You didn't realize he played at Augsburg. I think they actually won this maybe the three
NAIA,
Division three championship. They might have won the national championship when he played there. He was
yeah, they were NAIA. I was there back in the 80s, and
yeah.
I was in the 70s, and they were powerhouses. Actually, side note, talking to Oxford, at one point, Anheuser-Busch was on to sponsor him because of the eagle, right? That's the eagle that they have in the bush. And said, no, we can't do that because, we're a Christian college, Luther College. So that's back when they're really good. So anyway, we talked about Don, and you already mentioned him, but again, just to reiterate, Shortridge. He threw his name out there as one I was going to mention. You said a few comments about him, but you jokingly, I'm going to throw this name out because even before we were talking, we went on air. Stansbury, what can you
Yeah.
say about him?
Yeah. So Stansbury's another one of these characters. He's he's more of like a Patrick Reed kind of villain guy. You know, if you're ever at a tournament and there might be some kind of controversy or super competitive stuff, because you know Joe was always in the hunt. First as he was a real good amateur player, then he turned pro. I played with him over in Asia. Then he got his amateur status back, and that's when he really went to town. He won a bunch of state stuff. I think he's won just about every state AMs, state best balls. I think he's won the Open. Yeah, so he really had a nice run when he actually got his amateur status back. And he's just he's a short guy, you know. So I always get him bad time. He's got the the short man's disease, where he always wants to come and bite you in the ankle. But Joe
Well,
was a
maybe Joe's name should have been Shortridge there instead of Shortridge. Evan is. Maybe
yeah.
he should have had that last name.
Yeah, to hang out with Joe because I mean I towered over him, but yeah, he was super competitive and he loved playing and competing. Yeah, Joe was one of these real characters. He had his own little radio show on KSTP, and I always kidded that Joe would have a guest on, but there was no reason to have one on because Joe could basically talk the whole hour by himself, so it really didn't matter. And yeah, there's a bunch of characters, like I say, in Minnesota golf. There's just everywhere you go, especially these small towns. I know when I was playing and growing up, every town seemed to have 3 or 4 really good players. Especially school teachers used to be really good players because they had the whole summer off. And for some reason, they don't play as much golf as they did back then. I mean, if you went to a town, if I went to Bagley, the best 3 players were school teachers. In Bemidji, we had almost a dozen guys that were scratch handicaps that could really play golf and really push you. So when you would go to these shortstops, so if I went up to Roseau and played, you know, all you needed was 3 guys from Thief River, 3 guys from Crookston, 3 guys from Bagley, 3 guys from Boston. We'd get a dozen guys from Bemidji. The next thing you know, you got 45 guys in your championship flight, and they all can play. So it was really good competition growing up. And like I say, we didn't really have to travel that far to get people that would push you and that would really challenge you, you know, where you didn't have to, you know, fly off to play the Northeast Amateur, you know, and that was one of the things for myself, how maybe a little bit better known with guys that are probably 50 to 80 now is because I went into their town and played their tournament. And so they knew me from there. And then when I made the tour, of course, you know, you had your own following because these guys actually knew who you were and they saw you play and a lot of them competed against you.
Well, that's yeah. I mean, it's just you talked about hockey as far as the competition up in the northwest and northern part of the state. Well, golf is the same way from the sounds of it. So very, very competitive, very competitive. One last guy. I don't know if this guy would more of he played pro, but even Lumpy Heron, I think they call him Tim Heron. Was he?
Yeah.
You ever play against him?
Yeah. So I remember playing with Lumpy when he was still an amateur playing at New Mexico and we played the state open. Yeah. And his dad was out there. Yeah. I shot 67 that day and he had more birdies than me, but he went for every pin. So he airmailed a few greens and made a few doubles. But yeah, you could see he hit it long and straight and he just had this easy going deal. Yeah. The Lumpy, he is probably the number 1 character in Minnesota right now. I just saw him down there because he's in Arizona. He's still trying to play the Champions Tour, but he's got what's called the Viking, you know, with your hands. And he's had a couple surgeries. You know, when your hands start clawing together, you can't keep them.
Oh,
And so obviously you can't grip the club. So he's had a couple surgeries now to try to get his hands to open up again. And I think it's called the Viking because it's more of a European Scandinavian disease. And yeah, but he's had a great career too. And his kids are very good players, especially the older ones over playing Arizona, the Asian Tour now.
okay.
But Lumpy's the kind of guy you always love to get paired with, you know. I mean, it's going to be entertainment. And plus, you're going to see some great shots. And yeah, and he's just.
That's the type of guy I would be there, Bill. You know, I'm the jokester or whatever. I'm the guy who said I'm golfing. I'm going to probably be driving the golf cart. I mean, it's probably my job. But I have a good handicap, though. So that would help the team, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw up a picture. And this looks like a fun time.
Yeah.
What you guys said you won there, and can you talk about that a little bit? Because that had to be quite the experience with Mr. Tiger Woods there handing out the trophy to you.
Yeah, so that's when Tiger was at his peak there. He was the Buick representative, and of course the Buick Scramble. Was a national. That was literally our best PGA event outside for amateurs. It was the biggest amateur tournament in the world at that time for scramble golf. And Disney, if you made it to the finals, you got gone down there. They shut the park down and they'd have a parade for you and everything like that for the players. And it was just a phenomenal party. But the big deal for 2 years, Tiger handed out the trophy, so everybody really, really wanted to meet Tiger, and so they wanted to win the tournament worse than ever. And these were three of my members from the vintage, and the one thing about a couple of them could really hit the ball far, especially the gal, and they'd always give her a head start like 4 or 5 holes where it could be a huge advantage. And then a couple other guys, but yeah, so we end up winning by a couple strokes, and so we got to meet the Tiger. This was the national Oldsmobile Scramble net division of all deals. So, but that was a great time, and like I said, we got the tape. We get together. It'll be I think we're getting together here. It'll be 25 years on next year, so we'll have our reunion. But it was fun. Tiger was better than advertised back then. He was just a great guy. He got a TV interview. People always go, well, what's he like? He had a TV interview. He said, hey, you guys go to the pro shop, get anything you want, autograph, stuff like that. I'll be back in 15 minutes. I'll sign whatever you want, because he was always known not to sign stuff. But that was for people because he was always worried about people selling stuff. And certainly, my
Sure.
people were not selling his stuff. So he felt totally comfortable and was just awesome. And, he's had his issues now, but hopefully he comes back. He's just so great for golf,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's life. That's life. It's not a matter what happens; it's how you react to it. So hopefully he's on a good path now, and he can still play. I mean, yeah, he can still play. Sure, he can. Let me see what other thing. I know. I forgot to bring this up when we are talking about hockey, but can you talk about this? This is a cool picture. I think that I saw, and you have this now. What's this all about? I forgot to talk about this when we were talking hockey. I don't think I did. Did I? Did I talk about this with
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, no. So Chuck Grillo, our coach, he was a drafting teacher, and so he did a phenomenal job challenging his students. But he had one of his gals in his class painted this picture for him, and then gave it to him as a gift. And the guy on the left, of course, is Billy Helmerite. And then I think it's Steve Scholke. So it's not Jeff Wisner in the nets. I think it's Steve Scholke is the goalie, because I think this was like somebody in like 1976 class that did it. And then that I was number 2 there on the right.
Pretty
So.
cool.
And look, you can
Because
see
there's.
I look Native American, so
Well, I was gonna, yeah, I was
I
gonna say
definitely pass.
yeah. Because there's that in the arena there, the old arena there, they have a picture, a lumberjack. Somebody painted that on the lumberjack door, home of the lumberjacks. That's
Yeah,
what it reminded me of looking at that there. So that's kind of
yeah.
cool.
So
Um,
Chuck had that picture from one of his draft students. He just gave it to me, so he knew it'd be in safekeeping. So it's something I really cherish, and like I said, it's just some interesting times.
so, I'm kind of wondering, I'm getting over an hour here, and I don't. Nobody's ever going to catch Lefty as far as how long we talked to him, but um, just some other thoughts that come to mind about the whole, talk about sports up there in Bemidji at that time, the coaches, Rich Grillo, Coach Perkins, influences. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that I didn't bring up? Because we covered a plethora of topics here, people. What else comes to mind that we didn't discuss that I'd like to ask you for? Any thoughts? Just kind of open mic, so to speak.
Yeah, well, like you say, I almost think life's kind of like you could chop it up into thirds, and the first third was, like I said, it was for me anyway. It was kind of my own playing career, trying to make the tour, made the tour, played some Asian stuff. It was kind of all about me, all the people that got you there. Your Larry Perkinses, your Chuck Grillos, just a ton of people here in Bemidji. The school teachers and stuff like that. They actually, but I played on my own money the first couple of years, and then I was going to Asia, and I needed a little better cash flow. So they set up a little Izzy Army deal, and some guys threw in $3,000, and some guys only threw in $50. But they were my Izzy's Army, and it was just fun for those guys to be a part of my career and following it. And so the beer distributor here, there's Gordy Scar, who it'll be the 50th. He does about a lot of fundraising for Bemidji State University. So he has a big scramble here, and he was a big booster back when you were not supposed to get money from anybody. But if I qualified for the U.S. Amateur or something like that, he would always slip me $300, and those kind of people. And the one thing about me, I hate hotels, and I was always good at somehow sneaking into people's houses. And like the one guy invited me for the weekend, down in Texas, I stayed 8 years. So, but most of the people, it was like a month, but yeah, it was too funny. Like you were talking about Tom Lehman at Alexandria. The Herzogs were big rivals. Steve and I, we battled all the time. So he'd come up for the Birchman. He always stayed at our house, the Herzogs. And when I went down there, I stayed with them. And then we'd go to Detroit Lakes. There was this Joe Mayer guy from Bemidji who was in Fargo. So it was great. I mean, you went to all these places so you could actually afford to play all these tournaments because, for one thing, you never paid housing. And these people always looked after you. And it felt more like home, so you didn't get homesick. And they even do that on the Dakota tour now, where they have families there at these country clubs that if you want to stay in a hotel, fine. If you want a little private housing and kind of get some home cooking and hang out with some people. So I enjoy that about, the golf part. But like I said, the first third when I played, then the next third kind of, I actually stopped playing what I called travel golf 92, although I played some, still played some senior US Opens, and I played one PGA and stuff like that. But my wife, she graduated from med school and we settled in Staples. And, when you're going to start a family, someone's got to stay home and you can't have two stars. So she was definitely the star. And so all of a sudden you kind of have that transition for when you're a community and you do stuff in your community and things like that, and kind of take the same kind of mentorships that you had and try to pass them on to the young kids that you're hanging out with. And especially with myself, I had a lot of free time in Staples, even though they didn't have hockey, but you can coach other sports, baseball and basketball, and the golf program there we just had an outstanding golf program. The coach finally retired after 51 years, Glenn Hasselberg. No one lasts that long anymore. So, and I
No,
coached
that
for
is
29 years, and I just asked him, I said, could I have been the head coach one time?
that was my next question about coaching experiences, as far being with Staples. So how was, I didn't look up that's my bad, but how were you guys as far as state tournaments there at Staples? How did they do? How have they done over the years?
Yeah, so I think we won 2 girls and 2 boys, and we had a number of other seconds and thirds and stuff like that. Probably had maybe a dozen Division I players. We got a nice pipeline at NDSU right now. In fact, the young kid that from Staples that just went over there just won the big TV tournament over there at Moorhead. And yeah, it's just you want to put out good players, but you also just want to introduce them to the game. I see these kids that we've showed in our youth program, stuff like that, how to play, and then they went on to do other stuff, but they just had that that foundation. And now I see them playing 20 years ago, and they're just loving golf. I see it on Facebook with friends, and they got their kids out there playing golf now, and we're the ones that introduced them to the game and got them going and stuff like that. So those are the really enjoyable things now. It's not like building champions, and I'm really not into that, stuff like nowadays. These coaches are traveling everywhere with their players, and I always think you're your own coach, and you learn from some really good players, but you got to learn it from the dirt and get out there. Just like shinny hockey, you watch all these guys that have the great dangle moves. They all learned it on the outdoor rink, or who cares if you lose the puck, but so you can still see those Roseville War Road guys when they get into college and they can still dangle
Still doing it, yeah,
like
yeah.
nobody else.
Well, that's the thing about now. We talked about the different times, 50 years ago. Times have changed tremendously. You don't need a coach necessarily. You can get on the internet and look at all these different videos and whatever have you from coaches now, like yourself, for example. Take that and then you got to go out and do it and make it don't emulate and try to be like somebody else, but take that and make your game your game. But learn from people like yourself or anybody else out there. That's what it's all about. I want to ask you this, and this may be a tough one for you because you've had so many, but is there one experience, or maybe one or two, that really sticks out that like, wow, that was really, really cool. I mean, or, wow, that was quite the accomplishment. I can't believe I did that. Can you give me that? Do you have anything that sticks out in mind?
I think I've reached the age at 70 where I think when you start thinking about your career when you're playing, that it's not a good think about what you've accomplished, because then you kind of maybe get satisfied. I think that's probably in my career the best thing that I've never ever felt, even when I was winning, that can I get better? And I was never like satisfied with the player I was at that time, that I always felt like I could improve. But then when eventually, especially like I say, it seems like for golfers, once you hit about 65, if you're that lucky, normally it's like 60, where despite, I don't care how hard you work or how great a shape you keep and stuff like that, you're just going to get worse. It's like maintaining the decline. And, I've almost made it to 70 now, but it's just, you can see it. And then all of a sudden you start looking back like, wow, I accomplished a lot of really cool things. Like I say, one of the most cool things that I think about when I look back on is all the people that took me in to help me with my career. All these, like I describe myself as America's house guest, and all these really cool, interesting people that took the time to kind of sacrifice a little bit of their life or whatever, or just to be a part of yours. And you start reflecting on all that, all the different places that I've been. I would go over to Asia. Got to the point when I played over there after 10 years where, I was staying private almost every week. I would have pros that would say, "Hey, next time you come into Singapore, I want you to stay at my house." Those are the things I think are more gratifying than the championships itself. And obviously, to win championships, people are obviously going to pay a little more attention to you. But those are the kind of the really neat things that, people want to hang out with you for the person you are, and not so much what you accomplish and things like that. And yeah, so I've met a lot of really great people, and that's what I really, really
I
feel
was,
fortunate about.
and I was just gonna get pop on that because that's the thing about sports, whatever hockey, baseball, football, whatever it may have been. Um, I look back, I didn't play at a high level, but yet I have so many memories of good people that I've met over the years, and like doing this too. I mean, that's what it's all about. You can't. How should I put this when I look at it? Money does help. Obviously, it's up ranks right up there with air and water. But um, the relationships that one has, money can't buy that. Having the experience of people that you played sports with and met and families that you spent with, I mean, that's something you cherish. And to this day, I mean, there's people that I talk to still today that I played sports with 50 plus years ago. So that's the one thing about sports that I find most satisfying for me. Um, no, I guess we're kind of winding down. I mean, there's probably many things I missed out here, and Bill, but overall, the one thing I'd like to finish things up with, and we'll kind of wander down, is that if you were to take and have a young golfer, a young hockey player, just an athlete come up to you and say, "Mr. Israel, what advice could you give me to become a better person, a better player?" Because everybody aspires to be playing at the next level, whether it be college or pro or minor pro or, high end amateur, whatever it is. What advice would you, or multiple advice would you throw out there to a young person?
Yeah, like I said, it's any kind of sport that you play. You end up getting the fundamentals and stuff like that. Like with my kids, I just teach them just like I learned a good grip. That's like 50% of the game. And then you just take that, that's going to give you your direction. And then you just have to add some speed into it and then kind of go from there. I mean, but basically that's how you play golf. And they all turned out to be good golfers. But the one thing I always stress with them, their passion, you have to learn your own passion. And it doesn't matter if it's golf, sports, or whatever, your job, every day do you bring that passion. And that's something that, you learn how to do. So many parents, that's what I'm always concerned about when I see their kids in sports. Is the passion coming from their parents, or is it coming from the kid? And like the instruction that I gave a lot of times when I'd have a kid, I go, "Do you really want to be here?" And they kind of go, "No." I said, "Well, we'll just have fun for 40 minutes or whatever, and then maybe just have to have that conversation." Said, "Hey, golf's not my deal or whatever." But that's the one thing for young people. I said, be passionate about something. Find something that you really love to do, and you would do it for free the rest of your life, and get involved with that, and put 100% behind it. And yeah, but you can't give that, just the same as you can't teach grit. You know,
Yeah.
the one thing about hockey guys, that's the one thing you do. You see these guys, man, they just all have that grit. And yeah, it's like that, for professional sports, you got the one percenters, and then out of those guys, you got 1% of the one percenters. I mean, that's how slim of the margin is. So, but you certainly can enjoy the journey. You don't have to make the PGA to still be successful or whatever like that. And a lot of times it can be
No,
more enjoyable. That golf will rip your
no,
heart out on your best days. So, but I think, yeah,
well,
passion is the one thing that, you just hope people have. And a lot of times you can see that. I said, and that's what I see kids. I said, I think you're going to be a really good golfer because you just have that passion, and you'll make yourself a player because you enjoy being out here. It's not work.
and Bill, that's all the interviews I've done today. There's a commonality there, common pattern, common phrase, they always say, and I'm aware as well, if you don't have a passion, you're never going to be good at anything. If you have that passion, doing the extra work isn't work for you because you love the game. no matter what game you're in. You gotta have that passion and that. And I appreciate you saying that because it is so true. And kids today, like I said, they live vicariously, or excuse me, I back up. Parents live vicariously through their kids. And that's shame. It's a shame because, you know, just because maybe they want it bad doesn't mean little Johnny or little Jane wants it bad. You know, maybe they want to be a golfer. They don't want to, they don't want to play football. Or, they don't want to, they want to play baseball. They want to play something different. So that thing you talk about the parents and passion and the kids, you can't teach it. You gotta let them find their way. And you hit the nail on the head. And it's a very common theme. Everybody I've talked to in doing these interviews, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So we're winding down. So is there anything else on this note? I'm gonna throw it back to you again before we end up closing up here. Any comments? Any last comments you'd like to give? And maybe a name of somebody that you maybe forgot. Anything that comes to mind?
This is kind of one of my favorite deals. So my kids they play down in the cities or golf somewhere, and say they're playing out at Chaska Town Course, and all of a sudden they'll come up to the starter and say, okay, we're the 10-11 tee time. My name's Israelson. And the guy goes, Israelson? Oh, is there a golfer up in Staples? And my kids always go, don't even get started. They always shut everybody down. I don't want to hear about it. Because especially my younger son, he's a golf professional, and he's won a ton of tournaments in Minnesota. In fact, he always reminds me of the ones I didn't win, like the state high school. I never won that. So he's always reminding me of the ones I didn't win, because, he always gets it, well, your dad did this, your dad did, and I totally get it, and he has his own super nice career, and he's still playing and a really good player and stuff like that. But yeah, sometimes it can get old when you're like, hey, I don't want to hear about my dad.
Yeah, I'm my own man. I'm not my dad.
Yeah. Hey, I see
That's
him
a
at
good
home, and I tell you one thing, he's number 5 on our totem pole at our house. So
Well, Bill, it's been an absolute slice talking some hockey, talking golf and experiences out of Bemidji and all the worldly experience you've had playing the game of golf. And, all started in the great town of Bemidji. I have relatives there, and, I go through there, and I'll probably be going through there in a few weeks. When I go back for my reunion, I'll definitely stop by there, visit some relatives in Bemidji, and, there's good memories there. So I want to thank you for taking the time tonight, sitting down with me. I'll post this and there and put it online, and we'll have some good comments, I'm sure, from people that remember you. And I'm glad that we did this. So I can't thank you enough. And like I say, I wanted to make sure you got the last comment talking about your son there. So that's pretty cool. So I appreciate it, Bill. We're going to stop at that. We're a little over hour here now, and it's getting late. And I know I want to post this tonight, and I'm going to hear some comments today and some good things about the interview. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much again for doing this, talking about your career, some of the people you played with. And I know there's something that someone or something that we missed, but hey, that's what happens when you have a longer list of accolades playing the game. So
yeah, you just got to get that Brian Grand on.
You got to work on it. You got to work on that.
I'll work on one for you.
All right, I appreciate that. So,
all right,
there you go. That was Bill Israelson, also known as Izzy. Izzy Israelson. I love that nickname. There's only one other Izzy I know, and he's had a good career for him coaching up in Warroad on the women's hockey team up there, the girls hockey team. So, Bill Israelson's been my guest tonight. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much, Bill. So that'll do it, folks. You guys, thanks for watching, and so long, everybody.